The origins of the Camino Aragones can be traced back to many centuries ago during Roman times when roads and infrastructure connected various parts of the Iberian Peninsula. And these routes laid the groundwork for pilgrims, particularly traveling through France along the Arles route from the 11th century onward. So even today you can see some of these remaining Roman roads, especially on entering the town of Undus de Lerde on the Camino Aragones. The route officially begins at the Somport Pass in the Pyrenees, which has been used since ancient times as a crucial crossing point for pilgrims entering Spain from France. Some important sites on this route are the Monastery of San Juan de la Pena, which was a major religious site in the Kingdom of Aragon dating back to the early medieval times. It had one of the biggest monasteries at the time and was a major center of learning. In Jaca, you can see the ancient 12th century Cathedral of San Pedro, which is one of the most beautiful remaining Romanesque cathedrals in Spain. And not to forget the beautiful Romanesque chapel of Eunate, just outside Reino, at the end of the route, which is a bit of a mystery of who actually built it. Legends say it was the Templars, others say it was a mystical queen of the time. The Camino Aragones is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, Routes of Santiago de Compostela. From Col du Somport to Obanos outside Puente la Reina, where this route joins with the Camino Frances, you have approximately 170 kilometers or about 105 miles. This distance can, of course, vary slightly depending on the actual path you take. We started our Camino from Oloron-Saint-Marie in France along the Arles route, which is stunningly beautiful, and I would certainly recommend starting along the Arles route instead of taking the bus from Toulouse or from Oloron to Col du Somport. The Aragonese requires physical fitness. There's no doubt about it. There are many long sections where there is absolutely no opportunity to stop for refreshments. You have to take plenty of water. There is little shade, and in summer heat, this could really be a challenge. However, this route is almost devoid of human population in some areas. And in contrast to the Camino Frances, you are unlikely to meet other fellow pilgrims. But those that you do meet are often pilgrims who've walked this or other Camino routes several times, and they are some very interesting people. Here we have a brief outline of the route we took from Oloron in France, which will take you about 13 to 14 days, depending on your physical fitness. And as I said, there are two routes, especially the last two sections, Sanguesa to Monreal and Monreal to Obanos, that are fairly long. We planned some of our other shorter routes according to the accommodation available. You can stay in official albergues in the village of Acus and in Urdos, as well as in Arles. So how do we travel to Oloron? We took a flight to Toulouse, and from there we took a train to Oloron, where we started our walk. You can see from this elevation that it's fairly easy to walk, and we did more than 20 kilometers on the first day. But beware, in the early part of the year, during May, these paths can get pretty muddy, and it's slipping and sliding all the way. I once walked this path in the middle of May, and my feet were totally soaked. The first section gives you some inkling of what the next few days are going to be like. Walking along a river, hearing the sound of mountain creeks, passing through forest trails, hearing the sound of birds, then walking through small villages until you finally reach the town of Serrance, which has a beautiful old monastery, and you can actually attend the evening mass and hear the monks singing beautiful old liturgical songs.
We are seeing record numbers of pilgrims on the Camino this year. The Camino Frances is very popular, but as we know, there are many alternative routes. We are on the Arles route here, walking from Saint-Marie, which is just simply stunning from a countryside perspective. Lovely creeks, bird songs, and we haven't met a single other pilgrim this morning. It's very quiet, it's very calm. Perfect way to start your Camino. We're going to move up to the Camino Aragones in a few days. People often ask me, well, why do the Camino every year? This is the third time on this route. It's like reading a good book several times over. You see different things each time, and you open your senses to different perspectives. The first time I walked, I was so busy with thoughts of the past and the future, there's many things I simply didn't notice. This year, I will remember some good friends who passed into the other dimension, several good friends we lost in the past few months, and we will place stones at the way markers for them and remember them as they accompany us from another window on this Camino.
Walking from Serrance to Accous will take you a good 6.5 hours of walking without a break. Coming out of Serrance, you'll be walking along the Aspe River, and there's a beautiful trail through a forest as you come out of Serrance. But in wet weather, I would recommend taking the tarmac road, as this path is pretty steep in some sections and could get quite slippery when in rain. This route really gets more beautiful and scenic day by day as you come closer to Col du Somport. The route from Accous to Urdos follows the Aspe River all the way to the small town of Urdos. There's one caveat here. There is a road construction just before the town of Urdos, so you either have to take the bus, which doesn't go often, or you have the choice of walking through a long dark tunnel, which we did.
Well, we're in a dark tunnel, an old railway tunnel. The Camino route where you normally go along is closed due to construction work, so it's prohibited for pedestrians, and we've been walking for quite a while. We haven't seen the end of the tunnel yet, and it's drip drip from the rooftop. Luckily we've got a torch that Sarah's holding here, and we're slowly moving through this very dark tunnel.
It's day 3 of our Camino this year. We find ourselves in the beautiful hamlet of Urdos. This is just one day away from Col du Somport, the official starting point of the Camino Aragones. The past 3 days have been an immersion into the space of nature, hearing different birdsong forming one beautiful orchestra of sound. Nature is an expression of the divine, and diversity is a principle of creation. It's the very opposite of the messaging we find in the public space at the moment, with tribalism and the voices of tribalism and ethnicity becoming all the more powerful, and the voices of reason and the voices of the wholeness of humanity retreating into the background. The voices that we are hearing at the moment are the very opposite of kindness, compassion, and what divine purpose is in its essence. The more we connect with nature, the more we recalibrate with nature, the more we become immune to those voices out there and the voices of negativity that try to dehumanize our very essence. Coming out of Urdos and walking all the way to Col du Somport is quite challenging, but you have those beautiful mountain views with the snow-capped Pyrenees mountain tips. You need to take your time on this section. It passes some tarmac road, but most of it is through forest and beautiful pathways until you reach the top, the boundary between France and Spain, where you can get refreshments and then continue your route further down, or you can also stay in the albergue at Col du Somport. As you pass Col du Somport, you come across these ruins of the ancient monastery of Santa Cristina, which was also part of a huge hospital where nuns treated pilgrims. They have to bear in mind that many of these pilgrims had been on the road for many months, and especially this large section walking up that steep pathway of the Pyrenees left many pilgrims exhausted, and sometimes they suffered from disease and other illnesses. When I first walked the Camino Aragones in 2007, I came across this station, Canfranc, and I took a peek through one of those broken glass windows, this beautiful Art Deco building falling to pieces, and I was quite saddened by the sight of this deserted old building. But things can change. It's not often spoken about, but the European Union Cultural Fund has spent many millions refurbishing ancient architectural sites and beautiful buildings like this Art Deco station in Canfranc, which is back to its former glory.
Today is day 5 on the Camino Aragones, walking from Canfranc station to this small hamlet of Villeneuve. It has an infamous history. In the 15th and 16th century, some 20 women were condemned to death for witchcraft, and an artist symbolized their fate in this statue in the background. You can see some of their faces carved in this artwork. Today I was so reminded of Robert Frost's famous poem, two paths diverged in a forest, and I chose the one least traveled, and that made all the difference. Walking through different regions, through different locations, in a different country, traveling makes all that difference. Seeing things with different eyes and with a different perspective, it broadens the mind, it opens the creativity of your mindset and moves you away from fixed ideology. You see different cultures and different people living in different lifestyles. So many aspects that you discover when you go and travel.
Walking from Villanueva to Jaca is a fairly easy walk. Some sections following the Aragon River. Many pilgrims prefer to stay in the beautiful albergue in Canfranc instead of stopping over in Villanueva, but that's just a matter of choice. Since medieval times, Jaca has always been an important crossroad on the Camino Aragones, especially because of its famous San Pedro Cathedral. Pilgrim infrastructure is pretty good. There is a large alberge in the center of town, and the route is very well marked throughout the city. There are many restaurants and cafes and bars to enjoy a short, maybe one-day break before continuing your journey.
We're on day 6 of our Camino walk on the Camino Aragones in the town of Jaca, which has for centuries been an important crossroads for pilgrims walking to Santiago. In the background is one of Spain's most famous Romanesque buildings, still intact in its original form. It was built in the 11th century, and the remarkable thing about the building itself is that it has very small windows that were built in the era where stained glass windows hadn't been invented yet. So the inside, the interior of this church has a very somber, contemplative atmosphere.
Upon leaving the town of Jaca, you have two choices. You can either take the more challenging route to Santa Cruz de las Sierras via the monastery of San Juan de la Pena, or the easier, more straightforward path to Santa Celia. I would certainly recommend seeing the monastery at San Juan de la Pena, which is basically two monasteries, the new one up on a hill, and the old one that was virtually carved into a grotto. You could also take a bus from Jaca to San Juan de la Pena and then walk down from the new monastery to the old monastery of San Juan de la Pena, and then finish your stage in Santa Cruz de las Sierras, which is a pretty steep downward path, but it is quite doable.
Aragones and find ourselves in a really holy space in the ancient monastery of Juan de la Pena. And here we have a reproduction of the Holy Grail. For centuries, the monastery kept the original in this place, protecting the country and the region amongst the monasteries against Muslim invaders. And today you can see much of the interior restored. This was part of a grotto, and the monastery burnt down at one stage and a new one was built further up the hill.
While in Santa Cruz de los Cerros, it's worth exploring the beautiful Romanesque church in the town, the only part left of a huge convent that was closely connected to the monasteries in San Juan de la Pena. Then you leave the village, also passing a smaller Romanesque chapel, and you follow the route down a mountain slope up to Santa Celia, where you will find another beautiful Romanesque church, and the possibility there also, if you go from Jaca to Santa Celia, to stay overnight in Santa Celia. The route from Santa Celia to Arles is pretty mundane. There's a long stretch of tarmac road that you follow, and then it crosses over into a smaller forest, which is part of the older Camino route.
It's been a week on the Camino Aragones, and yesterday was quite a mixed day. We started in Santa Celia de los Cerros with a beautiful viewing of the Santa Maria Church, an old Romanesque church from the 11th century, where the stark contrast between light and darkness can be perceived with the very small windows and the quite somber interior. It becomes very apparent that light shines most in darkness, and it was much like the day was yesterday, walking up through beautiful mountains, hearing bird songs, the cuckoo, and then further down from Santa Celia along to Puente de la Reina de la Jaca. It was mainly on national roads, or long national roads with loud noises from cars and trucks, which was rather a monotonous and unpleasant part of the journey. And then we weren't being served in the only restaurant in town after a fairly long walk, and so we had to leave without getting food. Then again, up the mountain, beautiful scenery, which you can see in the background here, to our stay in the small hamlet of Arles. So the lesson of the day was we go through life with ups and downs, with emotional roller coasters, and we often tend to stay with those dark moments, those disappointments, instead of enjoying the good things, the beauty that is also part of life.
Some people might find the stage from Arles to Artieda a bit boring, but I really enjoyed it because it's so quiet. You hear only the sounds of nature, skylarks in the air, and here and there a sound of a cuckoo in the small forest section, the aroma of herbs along the way, and before you reach the town of Artieda, you have a lovely overview of the landscape. The town of Artieda has quite a history. It's very politicized because they fought for many years against the construction of a dam.
It's day 10 of our walk on the Camino Aragones. We're walking through the village of Artieda, positioned on a hilltop. What we're seeing here is a poster that you find all over the village here, protesting against the building of a dam. The dam is down in the valley below. This village has been very politicized because of it. Many of the folks down below had to leave their homes when the dam was built, and many of the farmers in the area lost their valuable agricultural land. So today our walk takes us through some of these deserted villages. Down below in the distance you can see the dam built some years ago, and the bridge over there in the distance meant that all that land below was more or less confiscated.
The path out of Artieda takes us down to the almost the banks of the dam along this ancient path that was fortunately saved by activist villagers in Artieda. The path walked by pilgrims of old, going back to many hundreds of years. It takes us to the hamlet of Rueste, which is now deserted. Many of these old homes are falling apart because the shift in groundwater caused many cracks in the walls, including to the tower and the beautiful old church in the village. And then leaving the village, you walk up a very steep hill, which takes us eventually downhill to Undius de Lerde. Before reaching Undius de Lerde, you will be coming across this beautiful old Roman road.
The amazing part of this route is it's almost complete silence, apart from hearing the skylarks in the background, and in the woodland part of this route you hear the odd cuckoo, you hear beetles, you hear grasshoppers, and you feel the wind against your skin. This is really a Camino for contemplation and inner reflection.
After the pretty hard walk on the previous day, to Understellerde, we decided to take a shorter path to Sanguesa on our next day in order to spend a little more time exploring this beautiful old town with its magnificent Romanesque cathedral. This section of the Camino Aragones from Sanguesa to Monreal we found just about the most challenging simply because it's very long and there are no places to stop for refreshments. So you need to take lots of water with you, and I would not recommend taking this route in summer heat. You do have some forest area closer to Montreal, but the major part of this route is without shade. The last stage of the Camino Aragones takes you from Monreal past the little village of Tierbas to Obanos, where it joins with the popular Camino Frances. Just before coming to Obanos, you will see from afar the octagonal chapel of Eunate, which is a legend. There's a rumor that it was built by the Templars or a forgotten queen, but it's just a wonderful conclusion to this Camino, and it's really worth a visit to spend a few quiet moments to reflect on your wonderful walk. And if you are planning to walk all the way to Santiago de Compostela, it's another 680 kilometers from Puente la Reina to Santiago, which will take you several weeks. But there are lovely places to see on the way, and you might also want to spend a day or two in Puente la Reina to rest before continuing your journey. If you've enjoyed this video on the Camino Aragones, you might want to delve deeper into the Camino experience by reading my two books. Deep Walking for Body, Mind and Soul is a non-fiction book on essential lessons learned on the Camino, and Walking on Edge is a fictional novel, a compilation of some true stories that I gathered while walking the different Camino routes. They are available where all good books are sold and also available as a Kindle.